And whenever those trees grow back, they grow back with memory. And their bark, similar to our skin, it holds scars, it heals, and it can thicken. Once you add in the trees to the conversation as witnesses, it gives you a whole other side of the story that you would miss otherwise. The traces of healing and recovery, I mean, it still lingers. I'm praying over my community that we can sort of mimic what our natural storytellers are telling us and what our witness trees are showing us, that healing is possible, regrowth is possible. And there's still a lot of story, I think, that we have yet to capture and really understand.
Welcome back to Black Earth Podcast with me, Marion Atieno Osiayo. In today's episode, I am so incredibly honored to meet with Dr. Alicia Odewale from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Alicia is a diaspora archaeologist, and she gets to document and explore sites of African heritage across the US and the Caribbean using maps, oral histories, and sacred landscapes. In our conversation today, I get to meet with Alicia and speak to her about her new project, the Black Heritage Trees Project. Black Heritage Trees are trees who have become companions and witnesses to Black freedom, Black resistance, and Black joy all around the world. I am so incredibly moved by this project, and I know that after listening to our conversation today, you will be as well. If you haven't already, make sure that you are following us on LinkedIn and Instagram, because we'll be sharing some really exciting collaborations with Alicia and the Black Heritage Trees Project. Enjoy. Alicia, how would you how would you describe your relationship with nature, Alicia?
That's a really good question. I think my relationship with nature is more connected to my family and my upbringing. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And even though I didn't grow up in the country is where I would feel more at peace, more stillness, more calmness. And so I mean, through the pandemic, that was one thing that I kind of reverted back to, that sense of, let me just go on a hike, go on a walk, get outside, get some fresh air. And that has always been my connection to nature. It's where I go for retreat. It's where I go for peace and just to exhale and be.
That's so beautiful. And I wonder, for people listening in who may not know of Tulsa, Oklahoma, can you tell us more about the landscapes there? Is that where you used to go for walks during the pandemic, or?
Definitely. In Oklahoma, in the United States, and this is a pretty flat land. It's known as like the prairie lands in the United States. So there's not a lot of mountains or hills, but there's usually a lot of beautiful trees, tall grass, and that's even like part of the state song for Oklahoma is the wind is sweeping through the plains. And that is something that I think, I mean, still holds true. I mean, Tulsa, where I'm from, is a cityscape for sure, an urban space. So there's not a lot of green space, especially in the inner parts of the city. But on the outskirts is where you can find a lot more natural space and more open landscapes, national parks, and other. There's one beautiful park outside of my city.
Yeah.
It's called the Natural Falls State Park. It has natural waterfalls.
Wow.
So we've taken some hikes out there as well, just to experience what a natural waterfall looks like and sounds like and feels like. So yeah.
Wow, that is so, so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. I am curious to know about your journey and what led you to creating the Black Heritage Tree Project. Can you share a bit more about that with us?
It's been a long journey, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, we're here to listen.
Oh gosh. So I am not an arborist. I am an archaeologist by training. And I consider myself an African diaspora archaeologist, but I now have adopted the term of like an arboreal ethno-archaeologist because I love to tell stories through the natural world, especially telling stories about Black people and our connection to the natural world. And I think I've always done that, but it's never included trees before. So I think I'm doing the same thing of connect to the natural world and telling stories about Black heritage, but instead of focusing on the artifacts and what lies underground and everything around our archaeological research, I'm kind of including trees, folding trees into the work that I've already been doing. But for everyone else, it seems like it's a coming out of nowhere. It's like but for the people that are close to me, they've seen this coming for a while.
Mm.
Uh, so for the last, I'll say 6 years, I've had this idea in my mind of doing a project around spirit trees. And that idea really, I think, entered my mind whenever I first stepped foot on St. Croix in the Virgin Islands, and everyone was so welcoming and so loving and so open to all the ways that archaeology can tell stories and all the ways that community connect to this landscape, this historic landscape on this island, that trees were always part of the conversation. Trees were not just part, central to the storytelling and how we mark space. And I had not seen that anywhere else in the world until I was doing work in the Caribbean. And so the spirit trees there on the island in St. Croix are ancestral storytellers. They are guardians. They're also known as Jumbi trees.
Mm.
They tell stories. You hold conversations with them. They give guidance. And they're part of the history.
Mm.
They're part of the culture. I'd never seen people interact and include nature as like a living being. It's part of your family. It's part of your family tree. Your ancestry is
Mm.
all connected to the natural world. So I never experienced that growing up in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Mm.
But after doing a lot of work in the I came home to Tulsa, and those connections I saw more clearly because of the work I was doing in the VI. So coming back home to Tulsa, it was like I could see those connections that I wasn't even aware of before.
Mm.
So starting this project was a way for me to try to recapture and see what else am I missing?
Mm.
And what else are we missing as a people? What other connections have we lost that we can maybe reclaim if we just, take the time to really search? And so the Black Heritage Tree Project came out of that question of what else are we missing
Mm.
and how do we get it back?
Mm. Wow. Thank you so much. What else are we missing and how do we get it back? That is the
Yes.
great question when it comes to our relationship with Mother Earth. One thing that I would love to ground our conversation is defining what a Black heritage tree is. I know it really depends on where you are, but now that you're kind of, a few years into this project, is there a working definition of what a Black heritage tree is?
Yeah, so we have a loose definition that
Mm-hmm.
we describe as a team
Uh-huh.
that we've come together to try to get our arms around what it is we're talking about. Because
Mm.
for most people, when they hear the word Black Heritage Tree, the question of how do trees even relate to a group of people,
Mm.
and what does it have to do with being Black,
Mm.
and how can a tree relate to race?
Mm.
There's a lot of questions around that already. And then for the people who have a concept of Black people in connection to trees, it's usually a negative one. So there's usually this assumption that we're only looking for lynching trees,
Mm.
or we're only looking for trees that have, been standing as a witness to mass violence, mob violence, and that is part of the story, part of our work, but definitely not the central focus point. Most of our work has been looking for trees that are planted, rooted in spaces of Black freedom. and that is intentional because we want to try to offer a counterbalance to the storytelling that is most common around Black people and our heritage. So we intentionally look for trees that are planted in spaces of freedom, liberation, joy, love, birthing trees, trees that signify new life. And but as our in our working definition, one thing we are trying to really emphasize is that age of these trees don't matter. Because again, the common misconception is that we only to be a witness tree, you have to be like a century years old. You have to be a centennial tree. And while we do have a lot of centennial trees on our list,
Mm,
it doesn't mean that younger trees can't be a witness to history, or
mm,
younger trees can't be a witness to Black freedom.
mm,
And we're also trying to push back against the narrative that Black freedom only looks one way.
mm,
Like, we are only looking for trees connected to Juneteenth.
mm,
And again, yes, that's on our list. But there's so many other pathways to Black freedom that these trees have witnessed
mm,
that it gives us a way to expand the concept of what Black freedom even is.
mm,
So we look for trees that are rooted in predominantly Black spaces, historically Black spaces. So that could be Black towns,
mm,
HBCUs, AME churches,
mhm,
burial grounds, plantations, yes, lynching sites, but also battlefield sites. There's been any number of spaces where Black people have contributed to history. There are usually trees left behind to tell that story. We
mm,
just oftentimes haven't been looking for them,
mm,
but they're there. So that's part of this project is now it's time to look
mm,
and listen.
mm. Thank you so much. Um, one,
I also sorry.
yeah, go
I
ahead, go
forgot to
ahead.
mention
No.
that in addition to looking for the trees that are planted in historically Black spaces, there are also specific types of trees that just by their species type,
Mm.
they're automatically considered Black heritage trees.
Okay.
Yeah, so baobab trees, tamarind trees, saman trees, the Crucian mahogany trees, the shea trees that produce shea butter. There's lots of trees that are deeply connected, calabash trees as well, deeply connected to who we are as Black people across the African diaspora. And those connections, we've never lost those connections, and oftentimes those seeds that were planted that become these trees in other spaces, like, we have been the ones carrying those seeds. So
Mm,
those are trees that just by their very nature, by their very species type, they connect to us.
mm,
And there are also trees that we've been tracking that if they can use their bark, their branches, their roots to tell a story, they are a part of our work.
wow, this is amazing. Um, Earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that when you went to St. Croix, that was the first time you encountered the concept of spirit trees or jumbi trees.
Yes.
I'd love to understand more, like who are they? Who are spirit trees? And yeah, can you share more about them and what you've learned in the process of witnessing them and listening to them with their communities?
Yeah. I love the question of who are they? The way you phrase that is beautiful because they are absolutely living beings on this earth, and they are contributing a large part to the culture and to the history as guardians. So the question of who are they is really important
Mm,
because each tree that is considered to be a spirit tree
mm,
is thought to be a present, like a permanent, like present being on this landscape
mm,
that you can always come to
mm,
for safety, for guidance, for just the time to reflect. It's a time of and for a lot of these trees, they represent a spiritual connection.
mm,
They represent a kind of like a portal, if you will, that connection to another side, another world, whatever your belief system is. These trees can be something that's standing in the gap,
mm,
someone standing in the gap. So it's like a physical presence you can come and talk to. And so for a lot of these spirit trees, so I'll give you an example. when we are looking for, and this is actually for me as an archaeologist, when we're looking for spaces of burials or
Mm,
spaces where there might be villages connected to enslaved African peoples, we will actually look for specific types of trees
mm,
to find those spaces because we know where these trees are planted, you're more likely to find a village of African descended people. So for tamarind trees, they're often marking spaces of burials, especially in St. Croix in the Virgin Islands. So we'll look for these spirit trees as kind of like living burial markers.
mhm,
When you could not maybe afford to have a stone grave marker
mhm,
over your loved one, you'll plant a tree, and that tree is a space that you come back to in honor of that person or in honor of this community, and it becomes a gathering space. So we look for tamarind trees that mark villages, that mark burials, that mark where community are gathering and, still sharing celebrations and still being in community with one another. And also, the same thing goes for the baobab trees and the VI and yeah, looking for trees that can actually help you find where people were in the past has been a common practice, especially for Caribbean-based archaeologists.
mm,
But I think people around the world could tap into this
mm,
if we're able to, think about where our ancestors were
mm,
and what kind of things might they have been doing in the past to mark space, to
mm,
claim space, and to honor those that have passed on.
mm,
And trees are a beautiful way of doing that.
mm. They're so beautiful.
They
I am
are.
so in love with trees.
Me too.
um,
But there's a couple of spirit trees that I didn't even know about, I just learned about, like, 2 weeks ago,
mm,
that in Senegal, they have a practice of burying loved ones inside of baobab trees.
wow.
So, the baobab could actually mark not just, the physical space where someone might be buried around, but
Mm,
since they are actually hollow inside, could be a space of shelter, could be a space of, a repository for, a loved one as well. I didn't even know that was a practice until, like, 2 weeks ago, so I'm
mm,
I'm actively learning more and more about how we connect to these trees every day.
mm. Thank you so much for sharing that, Alicia. And when I hear you kind of share practices of listening and being with spirit trees amongst the diaspora, um, it really speaks to how much our relationship with the rest of nature is spiritual. Like it's
Mm,
about reclaiming that sense of reverence, that sense of
absolutely.
sacredness that modernity and capitalism has really stripped away from our very like ways of being and ways of practicing. Um,
Absolutely.
and it's something that I also feel is a really important entry point when talking to Black people about nature. I think
Mm,
it's hard to be a Black person reconnecting with nature without exploring uh, how to do that from a place of reverence,
mm,
and finding our sense of place in the larger bigger picture, whatever that
yeah,
looks like for you, and whatever
yeah,
spiritual pathway you choose to practice, and I think that is a definitive marker of what it means to practice earth care as a Black person. And so I'm really touched by the knowledge that you're sharing with us about the practices that are already inherent in the diaspora around the world around spirit trees.
mm,
Um, I also wanted to speak to you a bit more about witness trees.
yeah,
Um, and this is hard for me. Like I think within my body, I feel a sense of it's not heaviness, but it's vulnerability.
mm,
Because I'm also conscious of the ways, the things that have been witnessed by trees
yeah.
when it comes to uh, Blackness and our Black histories. But I'd love to just hear more from you about witness trees in general.
Yeah, and just to add to what you have already shared, I think it's really important for us to not only reconnect to our purpose and our claim in this world and the way we connect to nature as Black people, instead of dismissing it as something, white people do.
Yeah. Or the conscious crew.
Yes, yes. It's like, no, this is for all
It's
of
for all
us.
of us.
So actually, one of the things we're doing to try to break that entry point for the people who are really hesitant to follow in this path of reconnecting to nature as Black people, we have been producing a guideline
Mm.
of how we show love to nature's oldest storytellers.
Mm.
And in this guideline, I mean, this is a lot of these practices are definitely Caribbean rooted, that
Mm.
you give water, you give nourishment before you ask the tree a question.
Mm.
You give, you give support, you clean up debris, you hold conversation, you actually listen
Mm.
and spend some time in its shade before you are, expecting something in return.
Mm.
And I think that practice and how we communicate and relate to the world around us can go so far. But it starts with, for people who are freshly new to this idea, being in any way connected to the natural world, I think it gives us a way to kind of open the door of that conversation.
Mm.
For us, we've been talking about spirit trees and witness trees kind of as synonymous words to
Mm.
describe these ancestral trees and ancestral storytellers. But I do think there can be a difference between a spirit tree that's occupying a space and serving as a spiritual connector, and a tree that may have witnessed something horrific,
Mm.
and you feel different in the presence of that tree.
Mm.
I know when I'm in the presence of lynching trees or trees on plantations that I know have been involuntary participants in a number of trauma inflicted on Black people, I feel different
Mm.
in those spaces than I do when I'm next to an ancestral spirit tree or a baobab tree that, again, might have witnessed the exact same types of horrific violence. But for me, I feel different in those spaces. To give you an example, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I'm from, there are trees connected to, during this time in this landscape, in 1921, there was a massacre in Tulsa. And I think you've had a guest on that
Yeah.
has actually talked about the recovery and rebuilding in the aftermath
Mm.
of all of that history. And for me, as someone who is from there, who is a descendant in this community, the trees are never part of the conversation. It's always assumed that everything was lost, everything was destroyed, burnt down. There's nothing of the original Greenwood left. But I know for me as an archaeologist, I've been able to find thousands of artifacts that connect to our historic Greenwood district. But also, once you add in the trees to the conversation as witnesses, it gives you a whole other side of the story that you would miss otherwise.
Mm.
And there are trees specifically on Standpipe Hill, which is on the northwest side of Greenwood, that isn't even considered, to be part of Greenwood for most Tulsans today, but it absolutely is. And these trees are growing in a square shape around a structure that no one else can see, but the trees know that it's there. And me as an archaeologist looking into this space, we were finding the majority of our artifacts where the trees were actually pushing them up to the surface for us to find, as their roots are looking for water. So I started paying really close attention to these trees because they were actively helping us in our on our excavations. And they were also trying to tell us something that I didn't even know I was like ready to hear. So bringing in arborists to learn about these specific trees on this hill, we were able to find out that these are hackberry trees. And that type of tree, that species type, is important because they're incredibly resilient, but they're also very common across the United States. But whenever there is a forest fire, canopy clearing, something catastrophic that happens, they're often the first ones to grow back. And whenever those trees grow back, they grow back with memory, and their bark, similar to our skin, it holds scars, it heals, and it can thicken. So whenever that tree has gone through something horrific, they grow back with a thicker, wartier, discolored bark as a measure of fire protection for themselves. And so we found that these trees on top of Standpipe Hill, holding space for a structure that no one else can see above the surface, have some of the most gnarly, discolored bark you can imagine. But knowing their age is also important because we thought, okay, could these trees have been here in 1921? Could these, to be true witness trees, you have to be 100 years old, right? So we looked into their age, and their age is about 50, 60 years old. So they weren't considered to be true witness trees, but that didn't sit right with my spirit, because what even is a true witness? And with these trees, even though they weren't there in 1921, they're too young to have been there in 1921. They're the descendants of the trees that were. And they grew back with that thicker, wartier, discolored bark as if they had been there, as if they carried on that memory and grew back to protect themselves for the future. And I had never seen trees, witness trees or otherwise, behave in that way as I've seen us as descendants, as people around this community in Tulsa still carry forward this history, still marked by it, still moving through it, even though none of us were there in 1921. We've almost lost all of our survivors that were actually eyewitnesses who experienced that themselves. And so now it's up to the next generation to carry this history forward. But how do we carry forward something without traumatizing ourselves and our children in the process? So doing that work around these witness trees has been really healing for me personally, because I've been able to really understand more about how we as people still endure in a space even after we're gone, how the traces of healing and recovery, I mean, it still lingers. And even though the trauma happened, the pain is there, it doesn't have to hold us captive to the past. So I see a lot of healing happening in nature that I'm praying over my community that we can sort of mimic what our natural storytellers are telling us and what our witness trees are showing us, that healing is possible, regrowth is possible. And there's still a lot of story I think that we have yet to capture and really understand.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's so deep. It's so, so deep.
It's really
It's
deep.
deeper than Earth. That's how deep it
It is.
is.
I've heard of people talking about trees that have witnessed violence actually look different. And that's something that we're looking into now that I didn't even think we would look into, but it's come up over and over again that like lynching trees all have a certain knot on them, or trees that are on plantations and have witnessed violence look twisted, warped, changed in some way by those acts. And now we're looking into something called bioacoustics, because when you're standing under the canopy of some of these trees as witness trees, they can sound different to people. And I think that goes back to certain spaces of trauma being haunted, and spaces of unresolved trauma and grief are commonly known as like those haunted places in town. So those trees that are in those spaces, do they sound different? Do they feel different? Do they look different? These are things we are looking into. While we're looking into, do the trees planted in spaces of joy sound different, feel different, look different? So we're still looking for trees that are connected to love, to birthing, as I mentioned, to celebration and freedom. We found a tree in Galveston. It's known as the domino tree. And talk about witness trees. This tree has witnessed a long time of game playing by the oldest, like the elder Black men in the community in Galveston County. They come together under this domino tree. They're playing games, but they're also making deals. They're talking about the goings on in the community. They're making decisions. They're coming together to support one another,
Mm.
and the the roasting, the joy, all of it's wrapped in under that tree, and that's one of my favorite trees in Galveston now, because and there's we literally were there touring and got to see men playing dominoes up under this tree, and it just really brought such joy to my heart that
Mm.
after all these years, this is still a space where people can come and just as Black men, as challenging as it is to be a Black man in this country in the United States, that it's getting more and more rare for them to even experience that joy of old age and retirement and experiencing the fruits of their labor after working so hard.
Mm.
Uh, to see Black men as elders experiencing joy and peace underneath a tree, man, it just gives me a lot of joy.
Mm. It is. It's so
So
joyful.
it is. So I see witness trees as not just witnesses to pain, but witnesses to immense joy as
Mm.
well.
Yeah. And I think there's, when I hear you speak, there's two parts to that, right? There's bearing witness in the sense of these trees have not only seen aspects of our histories as Black people that are deeply painful,
Mhm,
deeply violent, deeply horrific, um, but they're also bearing witness because they're alive and they
mhm,
exist and they are living beings. And I think
right,
that's one of the the core principles of the colonial worldview is that outside of human beings, nothing else is living, right? And so the act
right,
of bearing witness, a tree to bear witness, is also to remember that these trees are living just like us and coexisting with us through these
mhm,
moments. Um, I find it deeply moving when you spoke about, I forgot the species of the tree that grew back after
the hack
1921,
the hackberry
the
trees,
hackberry
yes.
trees. I think in our community, we speak a lot about trauma across generations. And,
Mm,
there's so much research now around um, epigenetics and how, trauma can be passed through DNA.
mm,
Um, and I think having a worldview that also includes other living beings who have not only witnessed the traumas that we've been through, but also been part of the traumas, right? They've also been survivors of that violence, and
yeah,
it's written in their bodies and the way they've reemerged. Um,
absolutely.
and this is it's such a challenging topic for me. Not challenging
Mhm,
as in just challenging because there's so much in my body that is trying to process the truth that I guess it's remembering what um Black Americans have been through, and
mhm,
Indigenous Americans have been through. And it's also remembering that all of this violence and traumas has happened in the body, right? It's
mhm,
happened in the body. We speak a lot about structural racism and the ways that has manifested in the institutions and the policies that exist, but it's also the first sight of violence happened in the body. And to I think when I sit with your work and with the project, being able to process that other living beings were also part of this is
mm.
uh it deeply saddens me. I wanted to hear from you what
But I also wanted to commend you, though.
yeah, tell me more. Oh, okay, me. I'm sorry, I was
Yes, you,
yeah.
'cause I think you're part of the the front lines of this reconnection movement,
Mm,
that whenever we talk about Earth
mm,
and our connection to it as people,
mm,
trying to connect people across the diaspora is challenging.
mhm,
But when you have an international platform,
mm,
it allows for people to see connections where they didn't think that had anything to do with them. So people hear your work and hear all the guests that you have on this podcast and realize that we are way more connected than we thought.
mm,
And I think that's really, really helpful as we can try to envision our place in the world.
mm,
You may be in the UK, you may be in the States, you may be in somewhere else in the world, but when you stop and listen to other people's stories, it gives you a way to really be in community with
mm.
people all over the world.
Wow. Thank you
You
so
don't even have to
much.
leave your house.
Yes, you don't have to leave your house. Thank you so much for that. I deeply receive it. Thank you. Um, I wanted to ask some final questions about what what this project has taught you or is teaching you so far about Black people and our connection to the earth, to the rest of nature.
Well, that's a really good question. I think I've learned a lot from March 1st to now. I have been in school
Mm,
and learning so much. Uh, One of the things I think I've learned most is that when it comes to, and we talked about this earlier on, but when it comes to safety, when
mm,
it comes to how we are as Black people seeking safety and seeking spaces of refuge and peace, like there's ways that we have to move to protect ourselves and protect the storytellers we're seeking to acknowledge and bring awareness to. And it's kind of challenging to bring awareness to a tree or to a story or to a storyteller without endangering them at the same time.
mm.
I mean, that's the world we live in right now.
And why is that?
So I think because we're in this era of anti-blackness and anti-diversity and anti this and anti that, that when it comes to being, a marginalized person, a marginalized body in this landscape, and you're trying to now reclaim space in a way that other people see is not for you,
Mm,
not meant for you, and don't want you to claim space in that way.
mm,
They don't even want you to exist in a lot of cases. That poses a threat to be able to share a story or share the location of trees without them becoming targets.
mm,
And that's common for the United States, where we are politically and socially in the United States, but that's sadly becoming more and more common around the world.
mhm,
And as we are in this climate, part of this world and part of this work, we can't ignore that as we are trying to seek deeper connections with the world around us, with nature around us. So for our project, I've had to learn that even though the original impetus of this work was to create a global Black heritage tree map, and that is still our goal, we've had to really alter what that looks like to accommodate for safety,
mm,
for us, for our storytellers, and for the trees that are witnesses.
mm,
And so we've been able to shift our mapping practice, and that sometimes we actually don't share the address of the tree itself,
mm,
but we'll point people to a storyteller. We'll point people to a tour guide. We'll point people to an organization who is responsible for caring for that tree without giving you the address for the tree itself.
mm,
And that's something I've had to learn was necessary. And part of the learning process, we've been able to connect with other groups, other organizations who are doing work that's similar to this,
mm,
such as the Black Cherry Tree Project. They are mapping spaces related to lynching sites in Montgomery County, Alabama, and sorry, Jefferson County, Alabama. And in that space, they've had to shift as well.
mm.
Their whole mission was planting cherry trees in honor of those victims. And those trees have been uprooted overnight,
Wow,
over and over again.
wow.
And having to learn that for some people, just the idea of planting a tree in honor of a Black person is so against their worldview and against what they believe Black people should be allowed to do, they would cut down and uproot a tree just to keep you from planting it.
Mm.
And that's hard to even sit with,
Mm.
that planting a tree is now a radical act.
Mm.
And so as we are doing this work to reconnect the African diaspora, to build our global Black heritage tree map, to pull all these storytellers in, our main concern is how do we keep ourselves safe as we do it?
Mm. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Um,
Thank you
s-
for making space.
yeah. Safety safety is it's an ongoing question as a
Absolutely.
Black person, as a Black body existing in this world. Um, and I think when I hear you speak about some of the things you're learning about how to do this work, whilst also creating safety for the trees as well as yourselves, right? And the communities who are co-creating this with you. I it's something that I've also learned in my work as an earth keeper, right? Because when I'm telling people, just go out, go and be in nature, go and be
Yeah.
in the forest, go, and
Yeah.
some people are like, there's some areas that I can't do that. Not because
Mhm.
it's, physically dangerous, like it's, treacherous landscapes. It's actually because there are people who do not want me there, right? They do not
Right,
want my body to exist
right.
in that space, right? And so I'm learning that it's less about uh finding safety, but creating safety as you're
Mm.
adapting in this
That
work. Um,
that part.
and I still believe that it is our birthright to
Mm,
be in natural spaces. It is our birthright to reconnect with other living beings. But safety is not a given, right? It's something that we have to
mm,
create. And whether that's going in groups with other people, there's so many um outdoor nature groups now, where people go in community to walk, and part of that is obviously the beauty of community, but another part of that is actually trying to ensure safety in some way. And so, yeah, this question of safety and
mm,
belonging in nature is, as a racialized person, is a really big thing. It's a
yeah.
really, really big thing. I think one thing I'm also learning about, you and witnessing your work is this question of history, right? What do we do with history? How
Mhm,
do we as Black folk make sense of these structures, these legacies that we in some ways have inherited,
yeah.
but we're also determined to create life and create futures that are rooted in joy, that are rooted in dignity
Mhm,
and care, right?
yeah.
And I find that really beautiful about the Black Heritage Tree Project because, um, not all of your work is dealing with um, the more traumatic aspects of our shared history, but some of it is, and it's
Mhm.
transforming that into spaces where we can connect and be in communion and create something beautiful together. Okay, Alicia, how can we support you and how can we support your work?
I first wanna acknowledge that we are a team of 23 people on the
Mm-hmm.
Black Heritage Tree Project,
Mm-hmm.
from all over the world, and we are so grateful for the funding we have received, but we are actively applying for more funding, and what we really need from people is to we want you to tell your tree story to us. Share your tree story with us, and you could actually map trees yourself on our website. This is a global citizen science project. So the act of mapping Black heritage trees is something we want to encourage as a global practice. So it's not just us as 23 people, but the people around the world who see connections to Black heritage trees, who want to share those stories. We want to hear them and we wanna include them in our work and to our global Black heritage tree map that we're building as a team. And in the future, if you hear anyone talking about Black heritage trees don't exist, challenge that, share this podcast and share this work so that, more and more people can come around to this idea.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Black Earth Podcast. We'd love for you to support us by liking, leaving a comment, and sharing with one other person in your network if you found this conversation to be inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram because we share more resources, opportunities, and collaborations with our guests. Black Earth Podcast is made possible this season because I have an incredible team around me. So thank you to our impact producer, Kaz Watson. Thank you to our editor, Elliot Roche. Thank you to Aditya and Vox Pop Studios. And thank you to our funding partner, Synchronicity Earth. Last but not least, thank you to you for listening in, joining the conversation, and sharing our podcast. See you in the next episode.